Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm your host, Patty Farmer, and I'm looking forward to sharing today's industry expert with you. And today I'm really excited because I think that our guest today is going to talk about something that I think is very timely with what is going on in the world right now. I also think that you will be able to take some action items, and I think it will maybe inspire you to kind of look a little bit deeper and kind of see what maybe some of these things are some things that maybe you might want to have a shift. And she will be here to kind of to help us with that. So let me tell you a little bit about her. So Gina Osborn is an expert in navigating chaos, crisis, and change. Having responded to catastrophic terrorist attacks and cyber hacks as an FBI special agent and chasing Cold War spies in the Army, Gina knows that crises can be managed, chaos can be controlled, and change is inevitable. Gina serves through speaking, coaching, and hosting executive roundtables, VIP days, and masterminds. She provides tools and techniques for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and small business owners to lead effectively during a crisis, eliminate chaos before it turns into conflict, and navigate change to create seamless transitions. She will also help you to remove obstacles so that you can attain peak performance. So, Gina, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Patty.
I'm really excited. I feel like right now, I think everybody, whether big or small or somewhere in between, we're all navigating some type of chaos. Hopefully, we're not in full-on crisis mode, but really honestly, we're all trying to navigate that new norm for all of us as we are moving forward. So I really kind of want to talk a little bit about this because I think it's really an important topic. And I think that sometimes we all feel like, we're the only ones that are going through it, right? Like nobody else really understands what we're going through. But in reality, in our own way, we really all are going through it. I also think that sometimes when you are going through it, you get caught up in the mucky muck and you don't really see it. I feel like just like everything else in our life, hindsight is 20/20. And once we come out of it and we look back and we're like, wow, I know that for me, I thought I don't really feel isolated, but now looking back, maybe I really was, right? So I think that sometimes we don't know how to identify when we are in it. And I think it's really important because the sooner you can identify that you are in some type of chaos, the sooner you can take action to get back on track. So I think that's really important. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? I mean, I got to tell you, being a FBI special agent and all that, I mean, you certainly have quite, a background, which I think is really great. But can you tell us a little bit about that and why you made the decision to serve by helping women identify and overcoming the chaos in their lives that can create change?
Well, having spent 28 years in law enforcement, I definitely have had my fair share of having to deal with chaos and crisis for sure. And when I left, I retired 2 years ago from the FBI after 22 years, and I decided what better way to serve than to help people navigate chaos or crisis or change so that they can work through it and continue to achieve their goals.
Which I think is really important. I think it is really, really important. And I'm sure that if you can, help someone with chaos and crisis working for the FBI and during the Cold War and all that kind of stuff. With all those things, certainly the chaos and crises that we may be handling right now, isn't going to be anything that you have never seen or heard before. So I have to tell you, when I'm going through things, having a guide or somebody who can lead you through it, especially when it's something that hits us on an emotional level, right? I think that's really important. So it's kind of nice to have a guide. So I think that's great. But thinking about it, what would you say was your biggest roadblock, obstacle, or blind spot that you had to overcome?
Gosh, I would say going into a male-dominated environment, just trying to figure out the lay of the land. And so this was back in the 80s when I went into the Army. And I quickly realized that as a strong woman, if I came on too strong, I would alienate myself from the men. If I came off too soft, then I would lose respect from my male counterparts. So I really had to figure out the balance as to how I needed to present myself. But then by doing that, I got into a perfection syndrome. I felt like everything that I did had to be perfect, because if I made a mistake, they'd view me as weak. And then I realized that that was just a self-imposed obstacle for myself. And once I stopped trying to be perfect, I had much more time and energy to not only do my work, but later rise through the ranks. And I was able to make a difference that way.
Wow, I think that is really important because, back then, I'm sure there weren't a lot of women there. So it's not even like you had that whole camaraderie of having a community of women who were going through what you were going through and who could really understand what it was, right? Because I think that's tough. And I really believe that nowadays, even with as many women as there are, right, in the workforce, I still think that sometimes women can feel alone when they're working for a corporation, or whether they're in a commission position, or even if they're an entrepreneur. Navigating that whole gender as well as diversity things that people have, I think that can be really, really tough. And having someone to guide you through that, I think, could be really important too. So when we think about that chaos or crisis, what would you say are some of the most common struggles or limiting beliefs you're seeing both at work and those who are working remotely?
What I'm seeing a lot of is when people are taking things personally. And when you take something personally while you're dealing with chaos or crisis, it's probably the worst thing that you can do, Patty, because it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. And when you're trying to resolve a crisis, or when you're inundated with chaos and you start putting yourself into the middle of the mix, by taking something personally, really, you make it 10 times worse, because instead of it being about the crisis or the chaos, it becomes about you. So what I like to talk to my clients about is do everything you can to stop taking things personally. I know the Orange County Sheriff here in California, and I interviewed her for my podcast, and she had 40 years of law enforcement experience, and she talked about a variety of her experiences. And I asked her, do you ever take things personally? And I expected her to say no, but instead she said, well, yeah. But then she said, but then I put it in a box and I set it aside so I can go out and I can do my job. So I think that was probably the best advice that I've heard when it comes to taking things personally.
Wow, that's really a good answer, because I don't think people really realize that they do that, right? So I think that's really important. So I also believe that as we're creating that new norm, what everybody's talking about right now for ourselves, I think it's also an opportunity, because I feel for myself, I can only speak for myself and for the people in my community when we talk about it, I feel like sometimes we get so busy doing that when you stop doing and now you're being, all of a sudden you have this opportunity to be like, wow, maybe some of the things that I've been doing don't make me as happy as they used to be. Maybe it's not quite how I want to serve anymore. Maybe I want to work with a different kind of client, right? I mean, there could be a lot of different things, but I like to think that right now, as we're navigating that, it's an opportunity to decide if maybe some of the things you were doing, maybe they don't need to be in your new norm. Like maybe this is really an opportunity, which is kind of like a mindset shift, really. So if somebody wanted to think about that, or they wanted to work on that, but they weren't really sure how, is that something that you can help people with? Do you do that, or is that out of your scope?
Oh, no, I absolutely can help people with that. Right now, like you were saying, people sort of feel like they're in a holding pattern and they're not moving forward. So that makes them feel frustrated. It stresses them out. But like you said, now is a great time to do a self-assessment to determine what's working and what's not working. And when you talked about the new norm from today may be completely different from the new norm of tomorrow. So what I help people do is figure out what's holding them back, help them remove that obstacle, and then help them create a roadmap so that they can move on and they can achieve their goals.
And that's really great, because having a roadmap, I think a lot of times what causes us to be in that mucky muck is we don't know what to do, right? So whenever somebody can not be in it personally, so there's not the emotion that's in there, and they can help us to, create the roadmap and then be alongside us. I find for me that one of the things I tell my clients is that you still have to do the work, but you just don't have to do it alone. But when I think about navigating and things that maybe I may be personally attached to, I really feel like I would need somebody who is not in my head, right? So that they could really help me to navigate that. So I think that is really important. So what would some tips be that you could give our audience that could help them navigate?
I think the easiest thing people can start doing right now, especially if they have time, is to identify the things that they're tolerating in their life. So what are you tolerating at home, with your loved ones, with your neighbors, with your community? What are you tolerating at work? These are the things that really aren't working for you and aren't positive for you. And this could be as easy as the boxes in the garage that need to be unpacked, or the leaky faucet in the kitchen that every time you walk into the kitchen and you see that faucet leaking, it's just one more thing that's zapping your energy. And that one thing isn't a big deal, but when you have a lot of things stacked on top of each other, that's when you start to feel absolutely overwhelmed. So when one more thing comes in that may be chaotic, you just throw up your arms and you're done. So if you identify and make a list of the things that we're tolerating in our relationships, within ourselves even, what promises are we not keeping to ourselves right now that we want to do? And then start ticking those off, prioritize those things that we're tolerating and get the easy ones, and then go down to the more difficult ones. But just remember, when you have a leaky faucet and you fix it, remember how good you feel and how, okay, that's one less thing that I have to do. So now when we have the time, let's get rid of what we tolerate, because if we can get rid of all of that chaos, then we can get to the point where we can see around corners and then prevent chaos from coming into our lives.
That was really a great answer. Thank you so much for really kind of going into that, because I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's kind of come up with a couple of examples, right? So what advice would you give to someone who maybe they recognize that maybe they're struggling with boundaries? I think that a lot of times people who are working at home, and maybe their spouse is at home too, and maybe their kids aren't going to school, they're trying to balance all these things, right? And, clearly for that to work, there needs to be some type of boundaries. What if they were struggling with boundaries, right? And so there's that type of chaos, either at home because they're working at home, or maybe even at work. Let's use that as an example. What advice would you give to somebody who may be struggling with boundary? Because I know that is something people need help with, because I know that we don't always see it. I read a book on boundaries and it was really, really good.
Yes, now is the best time to create boundaries if we haven't already done that, because we're living in such close quarters, we're cooped up. And just imagine, Patty, any difficult relationship that you have, and think back and think, if I would have created boundaries and put expectations on how this person should treat me, think of how different that difficult relationship would be now. So even if we don't do it at the very beginning, let's think about how we can create boundaries now. And communication is the key to conflict resolution. So while we're spending more time with our families, let's just bring everybody in and get everybody to have some ownership in creating boundaries. And especially right now, it's good not to create these triggers or avoid any triggers that you have. So say you've got a issue with your spouse that is never going to get resolved, not now during this difficult time and pretty much not ever. Now is not the time to argue over things that you know aren't going to be resolved. So it's important when we create our boundaries is to create a safe place and be kind to each other, because that's how we create a chaos-free existence.
Earlier on when you were talking about all these different things like the dripping faucet and the different things, and I think a lot of times in our life regularly, these things build if we don't take care of them. I think now where we are, you don't want to be the thing that maybe that one little thing that in itself probably isn't that big a deal, but all the 10 and 12 and 15 things that you're tolerating on top of that, that could be the thing that makes you kind of really have a meltdown, right? And I know for me, and I think that if there's anybody out there who's ever been divorced, right? I know I'm not the only person who comes from a divorce background, right? Has ever been divorced, goes through this, because I know that I remember when I got divorced, being a fixer and a solution-oriented person, I immediately went to a therapist because I wanted to make sure, I remember the very first day telling her, I want to make sure that I don't repeat any mistakes and that, I don't have a pattern. So immediately for me, I wanted to be a fixer and stuff though. And one of the things I learned about myself there was that at that time, I really didn't have very good boundaries. And so I had to learn that. By the time I met my husband that I have now, I was super clear with my boundaries. And I remember when we talked about getting married, I pretty much kind of laid them out. Like, I have like certain triggers, that I knew that I said, I don't like when somebody tells me what to do. So, if, I deal so much better if somebody says, oh, you need to, you should, that doesn't work for me. I even know those boundaries with people I hire that work on my team. I respond so much better to, have you ever considered, have you ever thought of, that's just something that's much better for me. And I really did learn that those tolerances that you're talking about could be as simple as, I remember there was something that super bugged me and it annoyed me over and over and over again, which was something as simple as it drove me crazy when my husband put his clothes in the dirty clothes that he wouldn't turn everything right side out. It was always inside out. And when I did the laundry, I had to sit there and turn everything back, and it drove me crazy and it annoyed me. But when I got married again, I told my husband, this is not going to happen. This is what I want. And just so you know, I'm going to fold the clothes and hang them up exactly how they are in the laundry. So if you put them in there inside out, that's exactly how you're going to get them back. And like, we've never had that conflict, right? And we've been married almost 25 years. So those things of knowing what those boundaries were, learning those boundaries are so important because they do trigger. And I feel like sometimes they come up in places that you don't expect them to, right? And so I think getting a handle on that. So through times of struggle or chaos, really knowing that and being able to identify them right away, right? I just recently lost 50 pounds and I found myself having triggers for that too. So I think understanding that and getting a grip on it. And I have to tell you, in every area of my life that I've had that, from losing that weight to wanting to not repeat a pattern, I hired somebody to help me through it. I knew it wasn't something I wanted to do by myself, right? I hired a health coach to work with me. I hired a therapist and then a coach to make sure that I didn't do that. So for me, I am a real advocate for work in your brilliance and hire people to work in theirs. So when you have anything that comes up, why would you want to struggle on it on your own? That's like another thing. Why would you just not want somebody to help you? So I have to tell you, for me, I think it's really important. And that's one of the things that I just love about what you're sharing right here, because I do think that sometimes we really need to shift. So talking about shifting, what are some of the shifts that you think entrepreneurs need to make in their business environment that we're in right now? I mean, we could sit here and talk all day about the shifts that I know people have to make at home, right? And I know that can be really full of chaos. But really, honestly, in the workforce, no matter whether you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, work for corporate, own the company, whatever it is, there are some shifts that have to be made now. So what would you say some of those are?
I love the motto, shift happens. So we have to accept what worked out in the old normal may not be working out now. And I think that's something that's really, really hard to accept for a lot of people. But once we accept it and we can start thinking outside of the box, that's when we can start moving forward. So again, this whole holding pattern, when we're not accepting what is in front of us, then that's when we kind of feel like we're stuck. So if you're struggling with getting over a wall, grab a shovel and start digging, because there's more than one way to skin a cat. So like I said, it's so important just to think outside of the box and think about ways to pivot so that you'll be able to serve maybe in a different way, but it could be in a bigger and better way. But we have to get out of our own way in order to be able to find that place.
That is so true. I was looking on your website and I read this statement: crisis can be managed, chaos can be controlled, and change is inevitable. And I think that is a powerful, powerful statement. Can you tell me and us what you mean by that statement for you?
Sure. So chaos can definitely be controlled. And the way we control chaos is by eliminating chaos from our lives, whether, like we talked about, what we're tolerating, the negative voices inside our head, anything that's keeping us from moving forward. And sometimes when we ignore chaos, it has a way of turning into a crisis, and then we're forced to deal with it. So we really want to control the chaos in our lives before it blossoms out to be something bigger. And I'm a big believer that crisis can be managed. I've seen it firsthand, whether it be with a terrorist attack or a cyber hack. And it would be a routine. Every time a crisis would happen, we would be able to deal with it, sometimes in the same way, but sometimes in a different way. But crisis definitely can be managed, and there are tools and techniques that people can learn to manage crisis and also get through to the other side. And of course, change is inevitable. And once we accept change, we're free to move forward and accept the opportunities that change makes.
I so agree. And I think when you were saying about shift happens, I love that, because I think when people think about change, they don't always think about it positive. They think change means negative. I don't actually agree with that. I actually think change can be good. I know that sometimes one example of that would be, I remember I had a friend who, through everything that was going on, they lost their job, and they had, just got rid of that position. And I thought, I am so excited for you about the opportunities now that are going to open for you. You've been complaining about that job for quite a while, right? So now this is an opportunity for you to actually make a change. So I don't think change always has to be bad. Change can be a good thing. And I think a lot of it is really how you shift your mindset around it. So I think that is so true. I read this article on LinkedIn that you had posted, that you were featured in the female lead. And I love the female lead. I think they're just fabulous. And you were asked in that article where you were featured, what would you say to someone who is terrified of taking a leap into a new career or industry? So talking about change and how it doesn't always have to be. I really liked your answer for that. I liked it a lot. So rather than me just kind of repeating your answer, can you share it with the audience? Because I just really felt like it was very, very good.
Sure. When I was eligible to retire from the FBI, when I turned 50 and a half, and for 2 years, I really contemplating, okay, leaving it. I love my job. I love my people, but I also wanted to serve in a different way. I wanted to do public speaking. I wanted to write. I wanted to coach people. And so I saw this picture when I was doing a vision board, and it was about the picture. In the picture, it was this girl who was dressed in this beautiful dress with this tutu and white gloves on, and she was jumping off a cliff, Patty. So instead of falling, she just kind of hovered. And I thought to myself, you know what? That is so profound to me, because jumping off a cliff is scary. I don't recommend it for anyone to jump off a cliff. But when it comes to changing your direction, it's scary, it's not easy, but achieving greatness is never easy. And so I also tell my clients that you don't have to do it alone. You can have a network around you, surround yourself by great people who are going to support you to go where you want to go. But that was probably the best thing that I could have done was I just jumped. And I believe by finding the success that I have every day, whether through speaking or coaching or my podcast, that I'm really glad that I did it.
That is really good. And I agree with you. I think sometimes we just don't. So I love that. That was a good visual in my mind too, of picturing somebody hovering. I just really love that. Early on in the podcast, you shared with us a little bit about how you really struggled in the beginning about perfectionism, right? I think something else that is really rampant right now is imposter syndrome, right? So I know that you had shared with me that you're very, very passionate about working with both corporate executives as well as high achieving entrepreneurs to identify both their strengths and weaknesses so as they can bypass imposter syndrome, right? As well as perfectionism before it can turn into a conflict. How rampant do you think it is in today's environment?
It breaks my heart to know that I wouldn't say it's rampant, but it affects so many women. And the imposter syndrome, that breaks my heart because those are the women who have gone out and they've achieved a lot through a lot of hard work, and to not believe that they belong there, that is something, if that's something you're going through right now, please reach out to me, because that's really the worst thing, because you really can't appreciate and enjoy all of the hard work that you've done to get you to where you've always wanted to be. And the same thing with perfectionism. What I've learned, and this is something that I evolved into, is it's our imperfections that make us extraordinary. So when you look at the things that are not perfect within our lives, but how we can apply that to the greater good, I don't know. I think that's definitely something for people to think about, that we don't have to be perfect, because perfect can only get you so many ways. Once we accept ourselves and live our authentic lives, that's when we can be authentic leaders. That's when we can be authentic in our family. So that's just so important to get past that. And all that is really is those are limiting beliefs.
Absolutely. It's really about progress, not perfection. But I also feel like, I know when I first became a speaker, right, you have this expectation that you feel like you really need to be perfect. But in reality, people don't want to hire perfect people, right? Because really what people are hiring you for in the first place is really your knowledge, your expertise to help shorten their learning curve and give them a faster path to get where they need to go. And if you were perfect, or if they perceived you to be perfect, they're not going to relate to that because they're not, right? So really allowing yourself and giving yourself grace to know that you're just not perfect, and that's okay. You can just be imperfectly perfect, right? Sometimes this job or this man or this situation is imperfectly perfect for you at that time, right? And to just accept that. There have been several times that I've just, and I actually talk to myself, I don't know if anybody else does, I'll say to myself, I'm like, Patty, just give yourself grace. And sometimes you just have to do that, right? And it's okay, right? It's totally okay. Earlier in the podcast as well, thinking back, you were talking about, women in a male-dominated environment, right? Can you share a few techniques? I want to make sure we don't get off the podcast with going back to this. I really want to touch on that. Can you share a few techniques to help eliminate a few of the common roadblocks that women go through and hit if they are in a male-dominated environment?
Sure. I had, maybe 5% of my employees were women, and I always tried to give them opportunities and push them in the right direction. And the one thing that I noticed with working with them is that a lot of women feel that they have to be 100% capable or qualified before they'd put in for a job. And men have no problem doing that. Men will put in for jobs that they're completely unqualified for, and I say good for them. But women, I would have conversations with women who I would want to put in for a job, and they would spend more time telling me why it is that they weren't qualified for the job than it would have just taken to put their resume and submit it to get the job. So pontification is the number one killer of dreams for the female species. I completely believe that. But it's also important for women to identify what is discouraging them from being the best they can be. You know, we always think about it. We always beat ourselves up with our negative thoughts. But it's so important just to identify that one thing that's discouraging you and remove it, and then you can move forward. And the last tipper that I have is I'm not a big believer in the glass ceiling. I grew up with a strong female mother back in the 70s who never put that nonsense in my head. But I do know that some women believe that there is a glass ceiling. So my recommendation to them would be to spend more time focusing on getting the job done and doing your work and achieving high performance than thinking about the glass ceiling and how you're not getting what you want because of that. Because really all that is a self-imposed obstacle as well.
Oh, that is so true. So, I can really tell how passionate you are about what you do. And one of the things I really love about that when I'm listening to you and in the conversation we had before is really that through that passion, how you're choosing to serve in so many ways. I mean, you're not just saying, oh, I'm a coach and this is what I can do. I mean, you're saying I can coach you through that. You have masterminds, you have VIP days, you have these executive roundtables, you speak, you train. I mean, in so many ways. So I think that is really good. And that's how you can really tell when someone, is really passionate about it. But what do you love the most about what you do?
I served for 28 years. I served my country for 28 years, and I really wanted to continue to serve. So by working with women who have these self-imposed obstacles and helping them remove them and watching them move forward and accomplish their goals and really believe that they can achieve their dreams, that to me, there's nothing better than that. That's just something that I really enjoy doing, is just watching women blossom with my help.
I think that whenever somebody has an obstacle or some type of roadblock, when you can help someone shift and get out of their own way, I mean, the possibilities are just so exciting for them. So I could see how that would be. So you're right. I have to tell you, you are a badass. I know that you were recently featured. I mean, you've just been featured in so many places, right? But you were recently featured in a magazine article and was listed as one of 35 badass women in the OC. And I just really love that. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And also that you work with some pretty amazing organizations that was mentioned there that you work with too. So I love how you have continued to serve once you weren't really no longer serving your country, or you are in a different way, right? But how you have continued to serve. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was quite an honor to be recognized by Orange Coast Magazine. It's an Orange County magazine. And just to be recognized by my own community, that really meant a lot to me. But I'm also involved in the Girl Scouts. That's one thing that I'm very, very proud of, just to help the women who are coming behind me. And to me, that really fills me up, because when I interact with these young women who are fearless, Patty, and that just, inspires me to want to do better in everything that I do. So yeah, it's really important for me to be a role model and to pave the way for the younger women who are coming up behind me. But I'm so inspired by those women. It's sort of like a two-way street.
I love that so much. That's so inspiring. So Gina, what's next for you? I mean, what projects are you working on? What do you got going on?
I have a few things going on. In addition to my coaching, I'm also speaking. I've got a few speaking engagements coming up. Everything is virtual right now, and I'm really looking forward to getting back on the stage and interacting with audiences and answering questions and things like that. I'm also working on a book about navigating chaos, crisis, and change. That's something that I'm really, really passionate about. And I also host a true crime podcast called Behind the Crime Scene. And that allows me to stay kind of with law enforcement and tell some really amazing stories about notorious investigations and how those investigations changed the people in law enforcement who work them.
that's keeping your toes in a lot of different things. But I think that's really great because if you're working with people who have chaos, it's not like people only have one kind of chaos. Like, it would be nice, but chaos doesn't fit perfectly in a box, right? So, this is the only type of chaos or crisis we have. So the fact that you have this diversified, portfolio of helping in so many different ways and in different environments, I think is really good, when people need you, right? When you're helping them, you have a lot of different things to pull from. And I think that is really, really important, again, when you're thinking about working with someone, right, that they can really, truly help you with that. So I absolutely love that, right? So Gina, I know people are going to want to connect with you. So can you tell us, how can people connect with you?
They can connect with me at GinaLOsborn.com. All of my social media links are there. And I talk about my podcast and my coaching and different things like that. So please visit me at GinaLOsborn.com.
Awesome. And we'll have a link for that in the show notes as well. And I will also make sure that we have the links to both of those articles. So if you want to read a little bit more about her in both of them, we'll have them for you as well. So another thing that I love about you, you're always about serving and supporting. You came with not just one gift, but two. So Gina, tell us a little bit about the gifts that you have for the audience.
I have, yes, like you said, I have two gifts. And the first one is an ebook, and it's called The 7 Key Ways to Eliminate Chaos from Your Business and Your Life. And if you go to my website, you can get it for free, and it will help you with creating boundaries and setting priorities. It'll help with not taking things personally. So a lot of the things that we talked about today, Patty, I have some good advice in that ebook for your listeners. The second thing that I have is, like we talked about, the imposter syndrome and perfectionism. And if you are in need of getting out of your own way, or if you're dealing with chaos or crisis, you can go to my website and book a free 30-minute no-pitch clarity call. Especially now before we get into the holidays, I know a lot of people want to talk about things and identify a roadmap. So I can help you with that as well if you go to my website and book a call with me.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. I really love how you actually said a no pitch call. So that's really great. That's always nice for people to know, right? So this is the portion of the show where I like to call this is open mic, sort of my version of social karaoke, where I hand the mic over to our guest. And, the name of the show is Marketing, Media, and Money. So, Gina, will you please share with everybody you gave us such great techniques and tips and some really good tactics, but what would you say is your number one marketing, media, or money strategy?
Well, first of all, let me say, Patty, that I have learned so much from you. You are a marketing, media, and money maven. So I appreciate just listening to your tips and everything that you do. So what I do is I actively look for media opportunities where my ideal clients will be, or the people who serve them will be. So I make sure that when I'm choosing those opportunities, I'm going to find the people that I can serve. And then I also make sure, no matter what I do, whether it's speaking or any sort of appearances, which would be TV or podcasts or a book tour, it is so important to engage and follow up with the people I meet during those, just because you never know where those relationships are going to lead you. I mean, these might be people that you need in your support when you're calling for backup. That could be, but I just think it's so important. If you're going to go out and you're going to do these things, go the extra mile and follow up, because you never know what you can get when you do that.
Oh, that is such a great strategy. And I love the way you said, not just actively look for opportunities where your ideal client is going to be there. Because I think a lot of times that's all people focus on. I think it's really important to realize that it's not just your ideal clients, like you said, it's the ideal partners you have of other people who serve your ideal clients, right? So I think that's really important. It kind of goes right into, my personal belief, which is your circle really needs to be, other people's people. That's the best way you can promote yourself, is by promoting others. And so I love that you have such a serving serving heart. I think that means a lot to me, so I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being here with me today, Gina. I appreciate it so much for you just sharing your zone of genius and your brilliance so generously.
Thank you, Patty. It's been a pleasure.
And to the audience, thank you for joining us today on the Marketing Media Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, and I'm sure you did, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. And if you're kind of wondering how your marketing media and money may be, why don't you take the free assessment that we have? And it will tell you where you're excelling, where you might want to take a few changes, some things you might want to work on a little bit, and maybe a few changes that would make massive results for you. It doesn't cost anything. You just go to www.m3, that stands for Marketing Media Money, but www.m3bizquiz.com. Until we meet again, I hope your day is phenomenal. Remember, if it's not, you have the power to change it. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you the next time. Bye now.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.